Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. The silence of the late hour shattered, cracked by the phone's insistent bleating beside my bed. A jolt, electric. My eyes found the digital clock face, 11:42 p.m., an ungodly time for communion. The displayed number glowed, alien, a local prefix, yet utterly unknown. Instinct, usually a shield, urged me toward voicemail, toward blissful ignorance. Tonight, however, some contrary impulse guided my hand. Yes, the word emerged tight, laced with an irritation I couldn't quite suppress. A breath of static, then a voice, low and rough as dragging stone. "I see you." Ice feathered along my spine. "Who is calling?" I demanded, my pulse abruptly a frantic drum against my ribs. A chuckle answered, hollow and devoid of mirth, like echoes in a tomb. "Your window, Silas. Give us a wave." My veins turned glacial. This voice knew my name. This voice knew where I was. Sequestered in this borrowed house on the town's desolate fringe, guardian of empty rooms while its owner traversed foreign lands. A quarter-mile of slumbering fields separated me from the nearest soul. Against all reason, a puppet on unseen strings, I drifted toward the living room window. Heavy drapes guarded the view, but a thin vertical gap betrayed the moon-washed yard beyond. Fingers numb with dread, I nudged the fabric aside, a mere fraction. Nothing stirred. Only the familiar expanse of lawn, silvered and still under the lunar gaze. "There's nothing out there," I reported into the receiver, relief warring with a persistent, unsettling confusion. "Look again," the voice rasped, insistent. "I am watching you, Silas. I am always watching." The curtain fell back, muffling the night. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. A cruel jest, surely. But the name? The location? "Look," I began, striving for a firmness I didn't feel. "I don't know who you think you are, or what game this is, but it stops now. I'm ending this call. Ring again, and the authorities will hear about it." Another dry laugh scraped through the line, raising the hairs on my neck. "By all means, Silas, summon them. They'll find only shadows, but I will remain, watching, perpetually watching." The connection severed, leaving only the drone of an empty line. I stood frozen for a measureless moment, the phone still glued to my ear, listening to the digital ghost. My hand, when I finally lowered the device, trembled violently. Mind churning, prankster, predator, or perhaps my own sanity fraying at the edges? The ensuing hour became a ritual of paranoia. Every lock tested, retested, each window surveyed, peered through into the unwavering dark for any flicker of anomaly. Yet the grounds remained undisturbed. No impression marred the soft earth flanking the house. no twig seemed unnaturally snapped amidst the sentinel trees. Utter normalcy reigned. Eventually, profound weariness gnawed through the fear, pulling me down into a shallow, troubled sleep. But peace was a fleeting illusion. The following night, precise as celestial mechanics, 11:42 p.m. delivered the phone's shriek, the identical unknown number. This time, apprehension won. I let the call die unanswered. Scarcely a minute passed before the notification. One new voicemail. With the tremor rattling my bones, I activated playback. Ignoring me changes nothing, Silas, the familiar stone-on-stone voice intoned. I'm still present, still observing. Pleasant dreams. I raised the message, blocked the number, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my sternum. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Some elaborate, malicious theater, perhaps? Yet the calls persisted. Night after night, 11:42 p.m. Each time, a fresh number circumvented my blockades. Sometimes I answered, drawn by a morbid compulsion. Other times, I let the inevitable voicemail accrue. The voice never varied, its assertion unwavering. I see you. I am watching. My world shrank, became a landscape of suspicion. Every creak of the old house, every rustle outside became a potential harbinger. Shadows writhed with imagined occupants. I invested in security cameras, motion-activated floodlights, even briefly entertained the notion of acquiring a guard dog. Though some deeper instinct whispered it would be futile. The cameras recorded only wind-stirred leaves. The lights remained stubbornly dark. After a week suspended in this state of siege, frayed nerves finally snapped. I contacted the constabulary. They listened with practiced sympathy but offered little solace. Absent tangible proof, a footprint, a face on camera, a direct threat beyond the unnerving, their hands were tied. Change your number, they suggested. Seek refuge with friends. But I couldn't abandon my post. This house, my friends' trust, it felt like a betrayal to flee, and a stubborn, perhaps foolish core within me refused to be routed by what might still be nothing more than sophisticated harassment. So I endured, and the calls continued their nightly cadence. The 10th night marked a deviation. The ring came, punctual as ever. This time I snatched the receiver instantly. What is it you want? The question tore from my throat, raw with exhaustion and accumulated dread. A pause stretched, longer than usual, pregnant with implication. Then, step outside, Silas. It's time we became acquainted. My blood solidified. No, I stated, the word sharp with finality. Absolutely not. I won't be lured out. A dry, mirthless chuckle returned, a sound now intimately woven into my terror. You misunderstand, Silas. There is no choice. Emerge willingly, or I shall enter. Believe me, the former is preferable. The line went dead. I stood rooted, a battle raging within. Every primal instinct shrieked, barricade, call for help, hide. Yet beneath the panic, a profound weariness resided, a desperate craving for resolution, for an end to this relentless pressure, regardless of the form it took. Before logic could reassert itself, my feet were carrying me toward the front door. My hand, slick with sweat, turned the deadbolt, eased the door open with excruciating slowness. The night air hung thick, still, charged with the scent of impending rain. I stepped onto the porch, eyes scanning the periphery, hunting for movement in the deep shadows. "Hello?" My voice was a thin, reedy thing, betraying the fear I fought to conceal. "I'm out here. What do you want?" Silence answered, vast and consuming. Then, from the Stygian darkness pooling at the yard's edge, a form detached itself. Tall, impossibly slender, its locomotion was disjointed, subtly wrong. As it glided into the swath of moonlight, my breath hitched, trapped in my chest. It was not human. It could not be. Its limbs possessed an unnatural length, its head an unsettling asymmetry. The skin, a pallid, sickly gray, seemed not to reflect the moonlight, but to drink it. Where features should have resided, there was only a smooth, unbroken plain. I yearned to flee, to scream, to shatter the awful tableau, but my muscles were locked in terrified paralysis. I could only witness its approach, its jerky gait smoothing into something more deliberate, more purposeful as it neared. It halted at the base of the porch steps, tilting its featureless head in a gesture almost resembling curiosity. Then, horrifyingly, a thin seam split the smooth expanse of its face, widening into a grotesque rictus, an unholy approximation of a mouth. "Silas," it uttered, and the voice was the same rough cadence from the phone. A pleasure to finally meet in the flesh. My own voice returned, a mere exhalation. What are you?" The slit widened, perhaps a smile. "I am multitude, Silas. Observer, custodian, adjuster of scales." "Meaning what?" I pressed, morbid fascination eclipsing raw terror. "Why have you been doing this to me?" The entity tilted its head the opposite way. "Doing? No, Silas. Preparing. You possess a resonance, you see. You perceive echoes others miss, sense currents invisible to most. That is why you were selected." My mind struggled to grasp the alien concept. Selected? For what? To join the vigil, it stated simply. To become an observer as I am. To witness reality unveiled, stripped of human illusion. I shook my head, inching backward. "No, I refuse. Leave me alone." The mouth contorted, a semblance of a frown. "Regrettably, that is no longer viable, Silas. You have perceived me. The path back is closed." It advanced a step, those unnervingly long arms extending toward me. I strained to retreat, to break the spell, but my legs remained leaden anchors. As its cold, gray fingers made contact with my temples, a shockwave of pure energy surged through me. The world warped. Colors flared into impossible vibrancy. Shadows deepened into infinite wells. Sounds assaulted me. The sigh of wind across distant prairies, the frantic heartbeats of unseen creatures burrowing deep in the earth. Reality itself unfurled, its intricate, terrifying, beautiful structure laid bare. It was revelation. It was agony. It was unbearable. A scream tore from me, echoing not just in the night air, but across dimensions previously unimagined. The creature, the observer, held me fast, its touch a strange anchor amidst the sensory maelstrom. "Patience, Silas," it resonated, the voice now inexplicably calming. "The initial moments are always turbulent. You will acclimate. You will learn dominion." Gradually, the overwhelming tide began to recede, allowing clarity to surface. I looked upon the observer with transformed sight, perceiving not the monstrous form, but a complex nexus of energy and intention. What happens now? The words felt foreign, shaped by new vocal cords, heard by new ears. The observer's energy pulsed, a sensation I recognized intrinsically as approval. "Now, Silas, you learn, you observe, and when the cycle demands, you will select the next." The implications settled upon me, a cascade of contradictory emotions. Dread commingled with exhilaration, loss tangled with wonder, a vortex of feeling. Yet, beneath it all, a nascent sense of purpose solidified, an unnerving feeling of homecoming, as if some dormant part of my being had always anticipated this strange apotheosis. I drew a deep breath, inhaling the newly complex world. "I am ready," I said, startled by the conviction in my voice. The observer inclined its head, extending a long-fingered hand. "Then, let us commence." As my fingers closed around its cool, smooth grasp, I knew the Silas that was had ceased to exist. A different existence stretched before me, vast, alien, and filled with a terrible beauty. And somewhere, in the quiet darkness of another unsuspecting night, a phone began to ring, waiting for its call to be answered. Cold steel kissed the nape of my neck, a chilling punctuation mark to the simple question, where to? I hadn't imagined a routine ride acceptance could detonate into this, a personal vortex of terror. But the gun's icy pressure was undeniable reality. My name is Finn. For the better part of a year, piloting a sedan for a ubiquitous ride-hailing service had been my nocturnal hustle, a necessary counterweight to student loans. Glamour, non-existent, predictable fares mostly, surges of post-party collegians, weary suits shedding the day's armor, the occasional wide-eyed out-of-towner. Nothing, however, had sketched even the faintest outline for the storm that broke that Friday. Midnight had bled into the new day, rain drumming a relentless rhythm on the roof. Exhaustion tugged, urging me home, but the app flared with one last summons, gilded by surge pricing too tempting to ignore. I navigated toward the pin dropped on a desolate street corner, a neighborhood whose map remained stubbornly blank in my mental atlas. Beneath a strobing, sickly street lamp, a figure waited. Tall, attenuated, swallowed by a dark hoodie pulled low, obscuring identity. An unnerving static prickled the air around him, a dissonance I tried, foolishly, to silence. Experience cautioned against snap judgments. He folded himself into the back seat, an unwelcome miasma of damp wool and stale smoke invading the car's confined space. "Appreciate the stop." His voice emerged, a low rumble like stones grinding together. "Not many venture out this way." A smile, thin and forced, stretched my lips as I met his gaze in the rearview mirror. His eyes were abyssal pools, intense, reflecting the dashboard lights like fractured stars. A tremor traced its way down my spine. "No worries," I managed, aiming for nonchalance. "Destination?" He recited an address an hour distant, deep into the hinterlands, far beyond my usual orbit. The fare, though, promised compensation. I fed the coordinates to the GPS, its synthesized voice a stark contrast to the man's gravelly tones, and eased the car into the rain-slicked street. Silence descended, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the metronomic sweep of the wipers and the percussive rain. His gaze was a palpable weight on the back of my head. I felt scrutinized, measured. "So," I ventured, the quiet becoming unbearable, a breeding ground for anxiety. "Heading out to the sticks on a night like this? Big plans." The pause stretched, taut and unnerving, long enough for me to assume he hadn't heard or wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words were shards of ice injected directly into my bloodstream. "Running," he rasped, "from something unpleasant." My grip tightened on the wheel, knuckles cresting like pale islands. "Oh," the sound escaped me, thin and reedy. "Like what?" He shifted forward, his presence looming, breath ghosting hot near my ear. "The law," he whispered, a conspiratorial hiss that raised the hairs on my arms. "Did something regrettable. They want a word." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I was certain he could perceive. "Calm," I coached myself. "Stay calm." What sort of regrettable?" He leaned back, and though I couldn't see his face, I heard the chilling amusement in his voice. "Why don't you find a spot to pull over? I'll give you the details." Every synapse screamed, drive, escape, faster, but the highway unfurled before us, a deserted ribbon flanked by dripping skeletal trees. No sanctuary, no exit. I don't know if that's wise," I stammered. "Maybe just straight to the address?" His hand shot out, clamping onto my shoulder with startling, wiry strength. "Pull! Over! Now!" Obedience born of fear. I eased the car onto the sodden, muddy shoulder. The instant the engine idled, I felt it. The unmistakable pressure. Cold, hard, absolute. Nestled against the vulnerable curve where neck met skull. A period placed definitively at the end of my control. I knew its nature without looking. "All right," he commanded, his voice unnervingly placid now, stripped of its earlier gravel. "Here's the new itinerary. Exit the vehicle. Slow movements. Then you get in the back. I'm taking the wheel." My thoughts scrambled, a frantic search for an escape hatch, a loophole in this sudden, terrifying contract. Gunpoint narrowed the options to zero. Unbuckling felt like severing a lifeline. I stepped out, the cold rain a shock against my skin. As I circled to the rear door, the brief illumination of the interior dome light caught his face. Eyes wide, feral, pupils dilated into black holes. Whatever specter haunted him, whatever act stained his past, its shadow now stretched fully over me. He slid behind the wheel, the weapon unwavering, tracking my compliance. "Phone," he barked, a clipped command. I relinquished it, watching helplessly as he lowered the window and flung my digital connection to the world into the consuming darkness outside. As the car lurched back onto the highway, a desperate plea formed. "Look," I began, my voice trembling despite my resolve. "You don't need to do this. I won't say anything, just let me walk away." A laugh, sharp and devoid of humor, cracked the tension. "Too late, friend. You're part of the narrative now, like it or not." An hour crawled by under a suffocating blanket of silence. Familiar suburban sprawl dissolved into undulating hills, then dense, forbidden forests. We climbed, ascending into the mountains, leaving civilization further and further behind. Eventually, he wrenched the wheel, turning onto a barely discernible dirt track swallowed by gloom. The car bucked and jolted, penetrating deeper into the wilderness until the dilapidated cabin emerged from the murk. "Out," he ordered, the gun emphasizing the command. Inside, austerity reigned. A scarred table, 2 mismatched chairs, a rudimentary kitchenette coated in grime. He gestured towards a chair, then commenced pacing, a caged tiger muttering fragmented curses and paranoid theories. "What's the plan?" I asked, hating the tremor that frayed the edges of my voice. He halted, pinning me with that unnerving, high-wattage gaze. "Contemplating," he stated flatly. "Depends entirely on your level of cooperation." Time warped. Hours bled together, marked by his erratic shifts between frantic, paranoid energy, rants about unseen enemies, global conspiracies, and unnerving periods of quiet calculation. I attempted conversation, searching for a crack in his armor, some sliver of humanity to leverage. But his volatility was a minefield. One moment, a semblance of shared plot. The next, the cold barrel pressed to my temple. Accusations of collusion spat like venom. Dawn began to paint the cabin's grimy window panes with bruised, pale light. Then a sound, distant, almost imagined at first, but growing steadily clearer, more insistent. Sirens. My heart leaped. He heard it too, his face contorted, a mask of fury. "You!" he shrieked, whirling on me. "You signaled them. Somehow." I shook my head, a frantic denial. "No, impossible. My phone. You threw it out, remember?" Reason couldn't penetrate his paranoia. He seized me, yanking me upright with brutal force. "Moving. Now." He propelled me towards the door, the gun digging painfully into my spine. But as we stumbled into the misty dawn, deliverance appeared, a procession of police cruisers navigating the muddy track, their emergency lights slicing through the gray. The world fractured into chaos. My captor bellowed incoherently, shoving me forward, an impromptu human shield. Shouted commands echoed from the officers. "Drop the weapon." Then an explosive crack split the air. I was airborne, then slammed into the wet earth, the impact expelling all breath from my lungs. A searing moment of certainty. I'm hit, dissolved as air rushed back in, untouched. A few feet away, my captor lay still, a dark stain blooming rapidly on the ground beneath him. The ensuing hours were a disorienting montage. Paramedics murmuring assessments, uniformed figures asking questions I struggled to process, the coarse comfort of a shock blanket. I learned his name, Silas Vance, a fugitive wanted across 3 states for a litany of violent offenses. My forced ride, my disappearance, had inadvertently tripped an invisible wire, activating a multi-agency search that led them directly to this remote refuge. Seated in the sterile quiet of an ambulance, watching the sun crest the mountain ridges, the enormity of the ordeal began to settle, heavy and suffocating. I had looked into the abyss and, somehow, hadn't fallen in. But survival felt less like triumph, more like a profound, unsettling displacement. The weeks that followed were a landscape of aftershocks. Headlights in the rearview mirror sparked panic. The chime of my new phone triggered visceral jolts of fear. Driving for the rideshare service again. Unthinkable. The open road, once a symbol of freedom and livelihood, now felt menacing. Yet, slowly, painstakingly, aided by therapy and the unwavering ballast of friends and family, healing began. A quiet revelation dawned. Survival wasn't an absence of fear, but the courage to proceed despite it. Strength wasn't immunity, but endurance. Nightmares still flickered, sudden noises still made me flinch, but the territory of my life was gradually being reclaimed. I found a new direction, volunteering at a crisis hotline, channeling the echoes of my own trauma into empathy for others. On the first anniversary of that nightmarish passage, I did the improbable. I drove, back up into those same mountains, not to court the ghosts, but to measure the distance traveled within myself. Standing on a high overlook, the vast, indifferent wilderness that had briefly been my prison stretching below, a quiet sense of peace descended. The path forward remained uncertain, perhaps always shadowed by potential fear, but the knowledge was solid now. I possessed the resilience to navigate it. The most crucial journeys, I understood, aren't always about reaching a pin on a map, but about the winding, arduous return to oneself, arriving stronger, scarred, but undeniably whole. The deed to Blackwood Manor arrived with the autumn chill. I recall the stiff parchment, the lawyer's precise script conveying the improbable news, inheritance from a kinsman thrice removed, a phantom relative whose name I'd never heard spoken, a sprawling estate dropped into my lap like a forgotten heirloom. Initial tremors of excitement rippled through me, visions of restoration, perhaps a lucrative sale, possibilities unfurled. Yet, upon arrival, sinking into the manor's embrace, a different reality asserted itself. An intangible presence began to thread through the hallways, announced by signed floorboards where no foot fell, doors easing ajar on unseen hinges, and the persistent, prickling certainty of not being truly alone. I dismissed it initially, attributed it to the settling bones of an old house. But the occurrences persisted, weaving themselves into the fabric of the days and nights. Now, the pretense of imagination wears thin. Something stirs within these walls when darkness falls, and sometimes brazenly, under the indifferent gaze of daylight. Whether it intends malice remains unclear, yet its proximity coils a knot of ice in my chest whenever I sense its passage. My arrival was bathed in the deceptive warmth of an afternoon sun, the sky a canvas of flawless blue. The approach snaked between towering, ancient trees, their branches interlacing overhead, casting the long drive in premature twilight. At its terminus stood the manor, a monument to time's slow erosion. Its paint, like flaking skin, peeled away in curls while moss crept possessively over the stone foundations. Stepping from the car, the silence struck me. Absolute, profound. No bird song, no rustle of wind, only the stark crunch of gravel beneath my soles punctuating the stillness. I retrieved my valise from the boot, the sound unnaturally loud, and ascended the worn front steps. Inside, the foyer gaped, larger than anticipated, dominated by the grand sweep of a staircase ascending into shadow. Tall, Palladian windows lined the walls, shafts of sunlight illuminating legions of dancing dust motes. Each footstep elicited a groan from the protesting floorboards. The air hung thick and stagnant, smelling of trapped time and disuse. A brief exploration of the ground floor revealed a vast drawing room, its furniture draped in ghostly white sheets. A dining hall centered around a heavy, timbered table whose surface geography seemed warped by humidity and years. And, down a short passage, a kitchen preserved in amber, its appliances relics of a bygone era, countertops mapped with indelible stains. Returning to the cavernous foyer, I hauled my valise up the complaining stairs, seeking sanctuary. Most doors along the upper gallery remained shut, portals to unknown chambers. Near the corridor's end, one yielded to reveal a spacious bedroom, complete with an adjoining bath. A skeletal wooden bed frame dominated the room, its mattress shrouded in a thick mantle of dust. Time was spent disturbing this accumulated history, wiping surfaces, sweeping the floor's gritty film, throwing open the windows to invite a current of fresher air. Amidst this industry, faint sounds drifted from below, a soft, intermittent tread, like slippered feet on bare wood. An animal, perhaps, having found ingress? I descended swiftly to investigate. The foyer, the drawing room, deserted. No scuttling, no frantic scraping. The emptiness felt absolute once more. I retreated upstairs. That night, mistrustful of the ancient mattress, I erected a simple cot. An electric lamp cast a pool of stark illumination, a necessary counterpoint to the room's main fixture, which spasmed with erratic flickers. I lay down near 10, hoping an early rest would prepare me for the organizational onslaught the morning demanded. Around midnight, a frantic drum began against my ribs. I sat bolt upright, straining to hear. The footsteps had returned, distant yet distinct, a measured, rhythmic pacing from somewhere along the corridor. My mouth went dry. A rigid tension seized my arms. Switching on the lamp, I moved to the door, pressing my ear to the cool wood, attempting to pinpoint the source. They seemed to emanate from the right. Easing the door open, I faced a velvet blackness. My phone's flashlight carved a trembling tunnel through the dark. Nothing. I crept into the corridor, the beam sweeping across floorboards and faded wallpaper. My heart hammered against my sternum. Glancing back reflexively, I half expected a pursuing shape. Reaching the corridor's end, I checked a small guest chamber. Empty. Windows sealed, curtains hanging limp and still. I stood, catching my breath, the only sounds my own ragged exhalations and the faint electronic hum of the phone. The footsteps had ceased. A tremor ran through me. Shaking my head as if to dislodge the unease, I returned to my room, secured the lock, and huddled onto the cot. Sleep remained elusive, finally succumbing only to sheer, bone-deep exhaustion. Morning brought the futile exercise of wrestling with reason. Echoes? The house groaning under its own venerable weight as temperatures shifted? Old structures were known for their peculiar symphonies, yet a stubborn tension remained lodged between my shoulder blades. The day was consumed by further cleaning and a cautious inspection of the antiquated electrical system. Fuse boxes from another age, lights that flickered ominously or refused service altogether. I meticulously noted necessary repairs. In the upstairs gallery, I paused before the family portraits, rows of solemn ancestors captured in oils, their gazes unnerving, seemingly tracking my movements. I touched a heavy gilt frame. The wood felt cold, unnaturally smooth beneath a veneer of dust. A disquiet settled deeper within me. I forced my attention back to practicalities. Around 2 in the afternoon, the sharp report of a door slamming shut echoed from the ground floor. I started violently. Hurrying downstairs, I discovered the main entrance agape, despite my certainty of having secured it earlier. The breeze outside seemed far too mild to have forced it. A frantic pulse thrummed in my wrist. My palm grew damp. I pulled the heavy door closed again, double-checking the latch. It felt worryingly loose. As a precaution, I wedged a nearby chair firmly beneath the knob. Later, seeking refuge and perhaps answers, I ventured into the study, situated at the first floor's far wing. Tall shelves, burdened with dusty, leather-bound volumes, lined the walls. A substantial mahogany desk sat near the window. Upon its surface lay aged correspondence in a thick ledger. The ledger chronicled household expenditures, notations on staff remuneration, the final entry dated decades prior, penned in a consistent, elegant script. Sifting through the letters revealed mostly mundane affairs, invoices, business dealings, a few personal missives detailing social events hosted within these very walls. Yet, certain passages struck an odd chord. Vague references to private assemblies, late-night conclaves, an undercurrent of formality, almost ritualistic, colored descriptions of observances and pledges. While nothing overtly supernatural was mentioned, the tone was unsettling, hinting at secrets held close. As sunset bled across the sky, I retreated to the kitchen for a meager dinner. Supplies brought from town yielded a sandwich and a glass of water drawn from the tap. The plumbing functioned, albeit delivering water with a faint metallic tang, another item for the growing list of concerns. I ate with hurried, anxious bites. Mid-chew, a low susurrus reached my ears, emanating from somewhere deeper within the house. Not a voice I could place, but undeniably the sound of hushed conversation. Swallowing hard, plate still in hand, I moved from the kitchen, trying to trace the sound. It seemed strongest near the hallway leading to the dining room. The light switch there proved useless. The bulb was dead. I stood poised in the doorway, listening intently. A weakness spread through my legs, my stomach clenched. The murmuring persisted for several heartbeats, then abruptly ceased. Cautiously, I advanced down the corridor, phone flashlight reactivated. The chill of the floorboards seeping through my socks. Peering into the dining room, I saw only the sheet-draped chairs standing sentinel around the table. Nothing stirred. The tall windows threw back my light, reflecting a pale, unnerved visage, my own. Is anyone there? My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the space. Silence answered. I ventured further, gripping the phone tightly, scanning corners, peering behind heavy curtains, beneath the massive table. Nothing. The house remained utterly still, yet my pulse continued its frantic rhythm. A film of cold sweat prickled the back of my neck. This pervasive dread was new territory. Old houses had never bothered me before, but Blackwood exuded a constant, palpable sense of foreboding. Once more, I sought the relative safety of the upstairs bedroom, locking the door behind me. I returned to the letters discovered in the study. The script described gatherings that, while perhaps superficially resembling parties, felt far from casual. There were mentions of repeated rites, stern warnings about maintaining secrecy. Crucially, the writer alluded to a specific room situated in the basement, a region of the house I had yet to brave. The mere thought of descending into that subterranean unknown constricted my breathing, yet the need to investigate felt increasingly unavoidable. That night became a sleepless vigil. Every creak, every groan of the old structure snapped me to attention on the cot. Shadows writhed in my peripheral vision, morphing into imagined shapes lurking just beyond the door. Soft, intermittent tapping sounds materialized, their source maddeningly elusive. My body remained coiled, tense, phone clutched like a talisman. Eventually, mercifully, oblivion claimed me for a few fragmented hours. The following day dawned with grim resolve. I would confront the basement. Preferring daylight for this expedition, I waited until late morning. The basement door, located near the kitchen, was locked. A key, found on a ring amidst the desk's clutter, turned the mechanism. Flicking on the single naked bulb suspended over the stairwell, I began the descent. Each wooden step groaned under my weight. The air grew damp, earthen. A distinct chill raised gooseflesh on my arms. At the bottom, a stark concrete floor stretched away, walls lined with dilapidated shelves bearing forgotten tools, dried paint cans, and cleaning paraphernalia, interspersed with vacant spaces. A narrow corridor branched off to the left, terminating at another closed door. Approaching it, my heart rate escalated. Turning the cold metal knob, I pushed the door inward, revealing a cramped, windowless room. The weak light from the corridor barely penetrated the gloom. My flashlight beam sliced through the darkness. A handful of plain wooden chairs stood arranged in a rough circle. In the center rested a simple wooden stand, atop which sat an empty, unassuming bowl. My light swept downwards, illuminating markings scratched directly into the concrete floor, intricate patterns of concentric circles and intersecting lines. Kneeling for a closer inspection, I saw they weren't random scrawls but deliberate designs, etched with considerable effort using some sharp implement. Tracing a line with my fingertip confirmed its rough texture. A heavy pressure settled in my chest as I rose, my breathing shallow. Instinct screamed that this space had served a ceremonial purpose. I pictured figures seated in those chairs, passing the bowl, their voices engaged in hushed chants or solemn whispers. The nature of their activities remained obscure, but the residual atmosphere felt far from benign. A wave of revulsion washed over me. I backed out quickly, pulling the door shut, and hurried back up the stairs, locking the basement entrance securely behind me. It would remain sealed, I decided, unless necessity absolutely dictated otherwise. That afternoon, seeking to dispel the clinging unease, I walked the grounds. The rear expanse was a wilderness of overgrown grass and towering, untamed hedges. A greenhouse stood on the western side, its structure partially collapsed, panes of glass shattered like broken teeth. Turning back towards the manor, it loomed silent, its multitude of windows reflecting the indifferent sky. A shiver traced its way down my spine just looking at it. The decision regarding its fate, renovate or sell, felt increasingly complicated. Some instinct warned that disentangling myself from Blackwood wouldn't be straightforward. I placed a call to a contractor I knew, arranging for him to assess the structure in the coming days. He agreed, though hedging about potential delays due to a busy schedule. The prospect of another person present, however briefly, offered a sliver of comfort. The isolation was unnerving, yet a stubborn part of me remained determined to comprehend the forces at play within these walls. Night fell, and with it the familiar dread amplified. I awoke later, not just to footsteps but to heavier treads, accompanied by a faint grating scrape, like wood dragging against wood. Scrambling from the cot, flashlight in hand, I eased open the bedroom door. The corridor lay steeped in darkness, but near the gallery of portraits, a flicker of movement snagged my attention. My heart hammered violently, advanced with excruciating slowness. At the corridor's far end, a shape resolved itself against the deeper black, vaguely human-formed. Before I could fully register it, the figure melted around a corner. I froze, mind racing, the sound of my own frantic breathing loud in my ears. A battle raged within me. Follow or retreat. Propelled by a desperate need to know, I forced my legs forward, though they felt leaden, my palms slick with sweat. Reaching the corner where the shape had vanished, I heard the soft click of a closing door nearby, but couldn't discern which one. I quickly checked the 3 doors immediately accessible: a linen closet, a small lavatory, a dusty storage room. All were empty, undisturbed. I stood motionless, the flashlight beam trembling in my grip. The air here felt distinctly colder. The thought of further searching in the oppressive darkness was unbearable. Retreating once more to my room, I slammed the door shut and jammed the chair back under the knob for reinforcement. I sank onto the cot, not to sleep, but to wait out the remaining hours until morning. My chest felt painfully tight. A dull ache began to throb behind my eyes, born of stress and sleeplessness. The sensation of being watched, observed from behind the very walls, was overwhelming. I strained my ears, listening for any further sound, but only an unnerving silence pressed in. I remained there, perched on the edge of the cot, scarcely blinking, until the first gray light of dawn filtered through the grimy windows. The next morning, I packed a small overnight bag. Another night alone in Blackwood Manor was unthinkable without reinforcement. My plan was simple: drive into the nearest town, secure a motel room, and return later, perhaps with the contractor, perhaps with someone else equipped to confront whatever resided here. As I exited the house, locking the heavy front door behind me, a profound wave of relief washed over me. The suffocating tightness in my chest eased fractionally. Settling into the driver's seat of my car, I cast one final glance back at the manor. It stood impassive, watchful. A part of me yearned to simply drive away and never return, to sever the connection entirely. Yet, the weight of responsibility remained. Inheritance, whether blessing or curse, demanded resolution. Selling, renovating, investigating further. These obligations tethered me to this place, but in that moment, escape was paramount. I turned the ignition key, the engine rumbling to life, a welcome sound in the oppressive quiet. Pulling away down the long, tree-lined drive, I felt my shoulders gradually unclench with every mile that stretched between me and that silent, waiting house. My constitution isn't built on fragile nerves, yet the wrongness of things announced itself that first night under the roof of my new apartment. Nearly 12 months I'd scrimped, hoarding pennies toward liberation from the shoebox existence I'd known. More breathing room, a neighborhood that didn't exhale despair, the simple sensation of forward momentum. These were my aspirations. Securing the lease on this second-floor dwelling felt like a summit reached, a tangible marker separating the man I was from the man I was becoming. The building wore its age with a certain stoicism, a relic of sturdier construction. Corridors stretched wide, ceilings soared, and beneath my feet lay the honest grain of real timber. I'd found its vintage character appealing during the initial walkthrough, though some instinct, quiet but persistent, registered a faint, cloying scent. Old pigments, perhaps, or the damp breath of time trapped in the walls. A quirk of antiquity, I'd reasoned. Normal. Weariness was my anesthesia that first evening. Moving had bled me dry of energy. Cardboard monoliths loomed in every corner. The bed frame remained a disassembled skeleton. I surrendered to the floor, throwing down a mattress and blankets, and plunged into sleep. Consciousness returned near the 3 o'clock hour, that nadir of the night. Darkness held sway. Absolute silence reigned. Nothing amiss initially. I turned, seeking the oblivion of sleep once more, but then it came, a sound from the corridor just beyond my door. Footfalls, heavy and measured, like the tread of booted feet. A rhythm steady, implacable as a sentry's patrol. Thump, 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 thump. I levered myself up, straining to hear. The pace was slow, yet possessed a deliberation utterly alien to the usual hallway traffic. Tenants hurried or shuffled. This was a purposeful impact, each soul striking the floorboards with resonant finality. A neighbor, I first surmised, perhaps one keeping nocturnal hours, or building security. But no guard patrolled these halls, only a landlord residing comfortably across town. Besides, the duration felt wrong. The sound didn't recede, didn't trace a path from one end to the other. It seemed contained. A ceaseless pacing, back and forth, directly outside. Slipping from the mattress, I crept to the door, pressing my eye to the Judas hole. The corridor swam in the jaundiced glow of the perpetual overhead fixture. Empty, utterly empty. Seconds stretched, measured by the frantic drumming in my chest, still vacant. Yet the footfalls persisted, an auditory reality divorced from the visual evidence. I pressed my ear flat against the wood. The sound was immediate, visceral, seemingly inches away. The peephole, however, offered only blank, illuminated air. An illusion, I decided. Grogginess, the building settling, strange acoustics playing tricks. I shot the deadbolt home, turned the knob lock until it clicked decisively, and retreated to my makeshift bed. After a time, the heavy tread ceased. An hour or more passed while I lay rigid, ears straining against the silence, before exhaustion finally claimed me once more. Morning light brought a sliver of dismissive humor. Fatigue breeds phantoms, I told myself. The day was consumed by the ritual of nesting, assembling the couch, connecting the television, arranging plates and cupboards. I willed the memory of the phantom footsteps into oblivion. The second night found me lingering late before the flickering screen of the TV. Furniture was slowly finding its place amidst the dwindling stacks of boxes. The living room, at least, felt habitable, a small pocket of order. Around midnight, I killed the television's glow and headed for a shower before bed. The bathroom branches off the bedroom via a short passage. As I opened my bedroom door, my gaze caught on the sliver of light beneath my main apartment door. It pulsed, rhythmically obscured. A shadow play suggesting someone passing back and forth in the corridor. A neighbor heading home late. But the eclipse of light lingered, pausing directly before my threshold. The flicker was too slow, too deliberate. Unease coiled in my gut. I stood frozen, hand still gripping the cool brass of the bedroom doorknob, waiting for the shadow to pass on. It remained. I edged towards the front door, the frantic pulse returning, my palms slick with sudden sweat. I am a grown man, Elias, I reminded myself, yet the simple sight of that intermittent darkness unnerved me profoundly. My hand reached instinctively for the security chain, a redundant check. Suddenly, violently, the doorknob on my side rattled. A frantic, forceful twisting, as if someone desperately sought entry. I snatched my hand back, breath catching in my throat. A moment of pure, paralyzing shock. Then instinct took over. I clamped my own hand over the knob, resisting the turning force. It strained against my grip. A silent, muscular pressure. No sound accompanied it. No breathing, no scraping, just that raw, insistent torsion. After several agonizing seconds, it stopped. Silence rushed back in. I remained planted, unsure of my next move. Again, the peephole. Again, nothing. The corridor stretched vacant, the overhead light burning steady and indifferent. A tightness constricted my chest. A vice of fear. A prank, perhaps? Some juvenile trick? I clung to the rational, forcing deep breaths, reminding myself of the locks, the solid wood between me and the empty hall. Sleep, when it finally came that night, was shallow and fraught. Every settling groan of the old building, every distant pipe clang jolted me upright. Oblivion arrived only near the gray hours of 3 or 4. Upon waking the following day, I discovered the bruise. High on my left forearm, a bloom of mottled violet, vaguely circular, with faint spectral impressions that hinted at fingers. I prodded the tender flesh. It throbbed in protest. Logic offered no anchor. I hadn't struck my arm. couldn't recall any impact, any heavy lifting that might explain it. The apartment remained a landscape of unpacked obstacles, true, but the injury felt specific, targeted. A random knock against a table corner, I concluded, pushing the disquiet down. Just a bruise. That night, the strangeness deepened its hold. I was in bed, the blue light of my phone painting my face, adrift in the digital stream. The apartment hallway light was off, but the corridor's perpetual glow still seeped beneath the front door, a pale threshold marker. Around 1, the familiar cadence began anew, those heavy, deliberate footfalls. I sat bolt upright, phone clutched like a talisman, eyes fixed on my bedroom door, waiting for the knob to turn. My heart hammered against my ribs, my mouth turned to dust. This time, the steps drew nearer, passed directly by my door, continued down the hall, reached the end, turned, and began the return journey. Each passage was an exercise in suspended animation, breath held captive in my lungs. My skin prickled, flushed with a tense heat. A primal urge surged. Throw open the door, confront the source, banish the unknown with defiant presence. But a deeper, colder terror held me fast. What might I actually find waiting in that dimly lit expanse? After perhaps 10 minutes of this relentless back and forth, a single, solid thump resonated against my door. Not a kick, not frantic banging. A firm, deliberate impact, like a heavy fist striking wood once. Slowly, silently, I slid from the bed, padded across the floorboards towards the door, applied my eye to the peephole's distorted lens. Nothing. The corridor remained stubbornly, unnervingly vacant. No figure, no shadow, no lingering disturbance. I laid my palm flat against the door's surface. Cool wood. Yet, beneath my hand, or perhaps within my own heightened senses, I perceived the faintest residual tremor. An echo of energy. Strange, I know, but it felt as if the wood still hummed with the recent impact. I stood there a long while, sentinel at the spyglass. Finally, a whispered reassurance to the empty air. There's no one there. I retreated to bed, cocooning myself in blankets, listening. Eventually, the footfalls faded into the building's ambient sighs. Exhaustion dragged me under near dawn. Morning inspection revealed nothing. The hallway stretched mundane and ordinary. The overhead light shone steady. No scuff marks marred the wooden floor. A pervasive unease shadowed me throughout the day. My appetite vanished. The bruise on my arm deepened, turning a richer shade of purple. I resolved to speak with a neighbor, but the doors on my floor remained resolutely closed, emitting no signs of life. Around noon, I knocked on the adjacent apartment. Silence answered. I knocked again, waited a full minute, listening intently. Nothing stirred within. Unwilling to embark on a campaign of random door-knocking throughout the building, I abandoned the effort, the sense of isolation thickening. The ensuing nights fell into a grim pattern. Sometime after midnight, the heavy, booted rhythm would commence its patrol in the hall. Sometimes a brief passage, other times a prolonged vigil just beyond my door. I developed a ritual, extinguishing every light within the apartment, sitting sentinel in the absolute darkness, listening. My mind became a finely tuned instrument of vigilance. The footsteps would begin, my respiration would quicken, and I'd wrestle the childish impulse to cower in a closet. Instead, I remained exposed, wide-eyed in the dark, phone clutched, emergency number hovering beneath my thumb. But the visual confirmation never came. Occasionally, a fleeting shadow would eclipse the light beneath the door. Sometimes, the doorknob would offer its brief, frantic rattle. The presence felt undeniable, yet the peephole offered only perpetual emptiness. One night, I attempted documentation. Lights off, I positioned myself in the living room, phone camera aimed steadfastly at the front door, recording. I sat, perched on a chair edge, leaning forward, waiting. The familiar tread began around 1:30, slow, inexorable. My pulse thundered in my ears, a frantic counterpoint to the deliberate external rhythm. I watched the door, breath held. At one point, the sliver of light beneath it was indeed obscured, a vague, upright silhouette blocking the corridor's glow. The knob rattled, a brief, violent spasm. I zoomed the camera, but the low light yielded only grainy ambiguity, a formless smear of darkness. No features, no details. Then it moved on. The courage to fling open the door, to confront the source of the recording's faint thuds and my own terror, failed me utterly. Weeks bled into one another, each night anticipated with a growing, corrosive dread. I took to retiring earlier, chasing sleep as a refuge, hoping unconsciousness might render me immune. But invariably, I'd surface in the dead hours, the familiar constriction tightening my chest. Some nights brought only the pacing, others featured the disembodied knock, or the brief, violent assault on the doorknob, and the bruises continued to bloom. One appeared on my thigh, another near my shoulder blade, always in places untouched by accidental bumps, always roundish, tender sigils I couldn't explain. The chilling thought began to take root. Was something reaching me in my sleep, leaving these marks on my flesh while erasing the memory of its touch? I lodged a complaint with the building manager. He listened with a carefully neutral expression, then informed me no other tenants had reported disturbances. His gaze held a flicker of something pitying, perhaps, or suspicious. The look one gives the overly stressed, the imaginative, the potentially unstable. He performed a perfunctory inspection one afternoon, checked the door, tested the locks, offered a shrug. Everything seemed perfectly sound, he declared. I felt the unspoken diagnosis. It was all in my head. My recordings, devoid of visual proof, capturing only faint, ambiguous sounds against the backdrop of silence, were useless as evidence. Moving out became a recurring fantasy, quickly quashed by the twin realities of financial strain and sheer stubbornness. I'd invested so much, emotionally and monetarily, in this place. Why should I surrender my hard-won progress to some inexplicable phenomenon? So I stayed, I adapted, I fortified. Additional locks were purchased and installed, a heavy-duty chain, another sliding bolt. Sometimes I slept with earplugs jammed deep or headphones broadcasting waves of white noise. These measures muffled the relentless footsteps, but they offered no defense against the bruises. I still woke, periodically, to a new, tender soreness on my body, a physical testament to the night's unseen violations. Last night pushed me closer to the edge. I went through my lock-and ritual around midnight. Deadbolt, knob lock, chain, slide bolt. Secure. Sometime in the pre-dawn stillness I surfaced. Not gradually, but jolted awake by a profound and suffocating dread that preceded conscious thought. My eyes snapped open. I was on my side, facing my bedroom door. It stood ajar, wide open, despite the certainty that I had closed it, and framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the faint ambient light filtering from the living room beyond, stood a shape. Not solid, not entirely defined, but a distinct column of denser darkness, an occlusion in the air. I froze utterly. My heart became a wild hammer against my ribs. My mouth was sandpaper. My breath hitched shallow and fast. I tried to will my limbs to move, but they felt encased in lead. I managed to blink, a desperate flutter of eyelids. In that instant, the shape seemed to recoil, flowing backward, dissolving around the corner into the apartment's connecting hallway. Adrenaline surged, breaking the paralysis. I scrambled from the bed, lunged for the door frame, slapped the bedroom light switch, then the living rooms, flooding the apartment with harsh illumination. Empty. Absolutely empty. I rushed to the front door. The deadbolt was thrown. The knob lock was secure. The chain hung properly fastened in its channel. The slide bolt was firmly in place. I stood there, trembling, arms rigid at my sides, the impossibility of it crashing down on me. Which brings me to this moment. Marooned in my living room, bathed in the glare of every light I possess, strung taut as a wire. My body aches with cumulative exhaustion, the bruise on my forearm a fading, painful reminder. My eyes dart constantly to the peephole, scanning the empty corridor beyond. Silence presses in, thick and watchful. What now? Part of me screams to pack, to flee, consequences be damned. Another part frantically scrabbles for logic. Am I sleepwalking? Is some unseen neighbor orchestrating an elaborate, cruel hoax? Yet, the bruises remain undeniable. The memory of that heavy, marching tread is burned into my auditory cortex. For now, I wait, hoping only to endure another night without waking to find locked doors inexplicably open or those measured footfalls returning, closer this time, perhaps pausing not in the hall, but just outside my bedroom. I am tired, soul-deep tired, but the thought of lying down, of closing my eyes, is unbearable. Any second now, I expect to hear it. That thump, thump, thump. The slow, methodical rhythm of boots on the floorboards resuming their endless patrol, and I fear, truly fear, I haven't much endurance left. The witching hour had bled past, rain descending in vertical torrents, transforming the vacant highway into a ribbon of slick obsidian. Ilara steered homeward, a fierce yearning to shed the storm's oppressive embrace, tightening her knuckles white on the wheel. Visibility shrank to mere yards, the wiper's frantic rhythm a losing battle against the deluge. Lightning ripped the sky open intermittently, brief, stark illuminations against the consuming blackness, punctuated only by the weak cone of her headlamps probing the void. It was a night amplifying every trivial sound into significance. The percussive assault of rain on metal and glass, the rhythmic sigh of the wipers, the engine's monotonous drone. An orchestra of overwhelm. The journey, already protracted, stretched thinner under the weather's tyranny. Not another soul shared this watery expanse, just Ilara, encased in her solitary bubble against the tempest. Then, abruptly, twin stars ignited in her rearview mirror, swelling rapidly from the gloom. A flicker of camaraderie sparked, another traveler braving the elements, but proximity warped relief into apprehension. The lights clung uncomfortably close, a predator's breath on her neck. Her grip on the wheel became a vice, focus narrowed to the treacherous asphalt ahead. Surely they would overtake. They did not. A gentle tap on the brakes, a subtle plea for space. Ignored. If anything, the distance closed. Her pulse kicked, a frantic drum against her ribs, a slow, deliberate inhale, a struggle for composure. Adrift in nowhere, swallowed by the storm, with this shadow latched onto her bumper. The situation resonated with wrongness, a dissonant chord in the night symphony. Accelerate. Create distance. The decision solidified. Yet, the spectral vehicle behind mirrored her maneuver, its luminous eyes unwavering in her mirror, a knot cinched tight in her gut, a weight settling upon her chest. Comprehension eluded her, but the instinct to flee screamed louder than reason. The road ahead, once just empty, now felt like jaws poised to snap shut. Pressure on the accelerator increased, velocity climbing beyond prudence for such conditions. Still, the pursuer shadowed her, maintaining the precise, unnerving interval, headlights drilling into her reflection. One part of her whispered surrender. Pull aside, let them pass. The other, louder part, screamed caution. Isolated, storm-lashed, a stranger behaving erratically. Stopping felt like an invitation to the unknown. No, forge onward, ignore them. Perhaps boredom would claim them. It did not. Up ahead, a derelict beacon materialized through the downpour, a gas station sign flickering feebly, a moth-eaten relic, a potential sanctuary, however flawed. Elara decelerated, indicator blinking its intention into the rain-streaked dark. The shadow followed. Her heartbeat surged, a cold dew prickling the nape of her neck. The strangeness deepened. She angled into the station's meager pool of light beneath the solitary functioning lamp post. The other car mirrored her, pulling into an adjacent space near enough to amplify the unease. Breathe. Stay calm. Maybe they just needed fuel, a flimsy hope quickly dissolving. Through the rain-spattered rear window, she watched. No movement. Two silhouettes, motionless, oriented towards her. The longer she observed, the heavier the atmosphere grew, thick with unspoken menace. Engine idling, escape contemplated, but the dashboard's fuel warning glowed insistently. Miles were few without replenishment. Exit in the car felt perilous, yet necessary. Wallet and phone secured, she plunged into the onslaught. Rain struck like icy needles. She fumbled at the pump, card swiped, nozzle inserted, the gush of gasoline a frantic countdown. Head bowed, eyes scanning furtively towards the silent vehicle. Its driver's side window was cracked open. A flicker of movement within sent shivers tracing her spine. The pump clicked off, full. Nozzle returned, cap secured. She scrambled back inside, the satisfying thud of locked doors a small victory. No backward glance, just escape. But as she shifted into drive, her own headlights illuminated a figure emerging from the other car. Male, tall, shrouded in a dark, hooded slicker, staring directly at her. A heart hammered against her ribs. Grip the wheel. Maintain control. Back onto the highway, a prayer whispered for solitude. A glance in the mirror shattered it. The headlights blazed anew, closer than ever. A dry swallow. Focus on the road. Mind racing. Why? What did they want? She pushed the engine harder, tires momentarily losing purchase on the slick surface before gripping again. Each curve, each mile, heightened the frantic rhythm of her heart. Yet, speed offered no escape. The pursuer clung relentlessly, headlights searing her retinas through the mirror, an unblinking, malevolent gaze. The pressure in her chest intensified, becoming a physical weight, her hands aching from their desperate clench. Miles dissolved. Ahead, the faint promise of a rest area. Stopping felt counterintuitive, dangerous, but a plan was desperately needed. She veered off, seeking the deepest shadows of the lot, hoping darkness would grant invisibility. Lights extinguished. She watched the pursuing headlights sweep past on the highway. A wave of relief washed over her, fragile and fleeting. She waited, counting seconds that stretched into minutes, then eased back onto the road, praying the ordeal was over. Within moments, the twin stars reappeared behind her, accelerating rapidly. Her stomach plummeted. He hadn't lost her. He had waited. Options dwindled. The highway stretched onward, an endless conduit through rain and isolation. Civilization, lights, people, perhaps authority, felt impossibly distant. Out here, only the road, the storm, and the hunter. Suddenly, the car behind surged, pulling level. Close enough to see, through the watery distortion, the shadowed profile beneath the hood. The set of a jaw, the glint of eyes fixed upon her, no word, no gesture. Just the unnerving proximity, the shared velocity, the palpable threat. Ilara stared rigidly ahead, pulse thundering in her ears, fighting the urge to react. Ignore him. He might leave. He swerved back behind her, then unleashed his high beams, flooding her car with blinding, disorienting light. Nausea twisted within her. Keep driving. Then, salvation, or its semblance, the distant, scattered lights of a town. Small, barely a constellation against the black, but it represented haven. She urged the car onward, a final, desperate sprint toward safety. But just as the first structures loomed closer, he accelerated again, cutting sharply in front, blocking her path. Brakes slammed, tires screamed, the car fishtailing to a halt. Trapped. His vehicle idled before her, an impassable barrier, headlights pinning her like an insect. The weight of his unseen gaze pressed down, fear coiling tight in her spine. Doors locked, phone clutched uselessly. No signal. Only the relentless drumming of rain on the roof filled the charged silence of the standoff. Options exhausted. Cornered on a desolate road with an enigma who refused to yield. At last, movement. Slowly, deliberately, his car edged to the shoulder, clearing the way. No hesitation. Ilara wrenched the wheel, accelerating past, heart lodged somewhere in her throat, resisting the urge to look back. Onward, towards the beckoning lights, the crushing tension beginning, finally to recede as distance grew between them. Yet, a final, involuntary glance into the rearview mirror revealed his headlights, diminished but persistent, still following. He was letting her go, but the pursuit lingered, a chilling epilogue staining the night. The immediate terror subsided, but the darkness he represented stretched on. It arrived in an anonymous cardboard carton, left squarely on my desk amid the sedimentary layers of old case files. No note, no sender, just the box, sealed with indifferent clear tape, my name slashed across the top in blunt black marker. Engrossed in the ritual of checking overnight messages, I sliced it open with barely a thought. Inside rested the camera. Vintage, undeniably. Its body was cold, dense metal. The leather strap, supple and worn smooth, felt as though it had passed through a century of hands. My name is Elias Thorne. I track down inconvenient truths for a living. Insurance dodgers, straying spouses, assets gone adrift. People occasionally deposit curiosities at my door, hoping I might unearth some hidden value or trace a lost lineage. I filed this under another peculiar commission. Little did I suspect it would irrevocably alter how I perceived every captured image. The supernatural holds no currency in my world. I trade in verifiable facts, tangible evidence. Ghosts, hexes, cursed artifacts, conversational static I typically tune out. Yet, this camera, it possessed an unsettling gravity, a weight exceeding its physical composition, as if packed with unseen burdens. Tiny fissures webbed the lens's edge. A corner of the viewfinder held a permanent, milky nebula. A label on the base clung precariously, half-peeled, revealing only the fractured text, M Photo Works, and a serial number eroded beyond legibility. Closer inspection confirmed it took standard 35mm film, though the spool mechanism felt archaic, unfamiliar. Tucked beside it in the carton lay a single, sealed film canister, its script foreign. Perhaps Cyrillic, maybe Germanic. A slip of paper offered only 5 words. A rare find. Enjoy. No signature, no context. I shrugged, consigning the camera and its cryptic message to a desk drawer's oblivion. That week, duty called me to a cavernous warehouse, victim of repeated illicit entries. My task, document the trespasser's signature. Footprints and dust, the scored metal around a forced door, the general disarray within. My reliable digital SLR, offering instant confirmation, was the logical choice. Yet, some contrary impulse, a flicker of morbid curiosity perhaps, made me retrieve the vintage camera instead. After acquiring a few rolls of standard film from a corner shop, I threaded one into the unfamiliar mechanism. For half an hour, I moved through the warehouse's echoing space, capturing scattered detritus, graffiti-scarred walls, the violated lock. Beyond the viewfinder's clouded edge, nothing seemed amiss. Development could wait. I entrusted the exposed roll to Silas Blackwood, whose small chemical-scented photo lab had been a neighborhood fixture since my youth. Silas knew the alchemy of silver halides. When I returned for collection, his gaze held a peculiar searching quality as he passed the envelope over the counter. My inquiry about the results met with a non-committal shrug. The negatives, he murmured, were clean, technically sound. But the prints, several frames exhibited peculiar distortions. I assumed mechanical flaws, a scratched lens element, a sticky shutter, the likely culprits of an aged machine. It was back in my apartment, under the stark glare of the kitchen bulb, that the chill truly found me. Spreading the prints across the table, I saw them. In nearly half the exposures, anomalies lurked. One photograph captured, near the frame's margin, a nebulous form, vaguely anthropomorphic yet translucent as exhaled breath in winter. Another revealed 2 shapes huddled in the background, swathed in what looked like ragged, shadowed dark hoods, their faces entirely obscured, positioned behind a metal shelving unit I distinctly recalled being empty. They hadn't been visible through the lens. These weren't mere blurs, they seemed warped, bent, and possibly compressed into the photographic space. My palms grew slick. Taking a deliberate breath, I scanned the remaining prints. Variations on a theme. Twisted silhouettes, umbral figures caught mid-crouch or lean, perpetually out of focus, occupying spaces with a disturbing, deliberate wrongness. My ingrained skepticism scrabbled for purchase. A malfunction in camera? I re-examined the prints. These intrusions felt too specific, too posed to be mere lot leaks or accidental double exposures. I slid them back into their envelope, forcing the explanation of faulty equipment. The following morning, armed with my digital camera, I returned to the warehouse, meticulously replicating every shot, every angle. The digital images emerged crisp, sterile, utterly mundane. No phantoms, no inexplicable shadows. Yet the unease lingered, a low hum beneath the surface of my pragmatism. The subsequent weekend involved surveillance at a threadbare motel on the city's frayed edge. Seeking discretion, I established a vantage point near the parking lot as dusk bled the color from the sky. My digital camera, I realized, lay forgotten in the car's boot. The vintage relic, however, rested on the passenger seat. Almost by reflex, I loaded it with fresh film, capturing a few frames of my subject disappearing into a room. The scene itself was unremarkable. Peeling paint, sputtering neon, the transient melancholy of such places. I finished the roll the next morning and returned it to Silas's lab. He greeted me with that now familiar look of troubled perplexity. Later, parked down the street, I examined the new prints. The first half dozen were innocuous. A man walking, the motel's tired sign, a car beneath a flickering bulb. But then, the shadows reappeared, closer this time, creeping into the foreground. One hunched against a concrete stairwell, a knot of darkness. Another stooped near the subject's car, bent forward in a way that tightened my stomach. Its limbs seemed unnaturally attenuated. I laid the photos on the adjacent seat, aware of a slight tremor in my hands. Rationalizations flickered. Flawed film stock, a chemical mishap in development. But a deeper conviction asserted itself. This wasn't a glitch. Something else had shared the frame. Over the ensuing weeks, consumed by new cases, I intermittently used the vintage camera, driven by a morbid compulsion to understand. Each developed role confirmed the haunting presence. Sometimes faint human-like transparencies ghosted the edges. Other times, gnarled entities with grotesquely distorted appendages manifested, occupying impossible spaces, clinging near a ceiling, partially emerging from a solid wall. I found myself rubbing my temples, trying to reconcile the irreconcilable. The evidence lay starkly before me, and with each new batch, a chilling pattern solidified. The figures migrated, drawn incrementally nearer to the photograph's intended subject. Nearer, it felt, to the photographer. One night, sequestered in my office long after the building fell silent, I reviewed the day's surveillance prints under the solitary beam of my desk lamp. It was late, perhaps 10. A disturbing narrative unfolded across the final exposures. The first frame, a single, dark, cowled shape hugging the periphery. The second, two such silhouettes having advanced noticeably. The third, they occupied the mid-ground, closer now than the person I had been tracking. In the fourth photograph, something resembling an arm, skeletal and elongated, reached from the shadows, its fingers splayed at an unnatural angle. Goose flesh prickled my arms. I pushed my chair back, instinctively creating distance. An abrupt, powerful urge compelled me to check the window. My office is on the third floor. The blinds were up. A glance outside revealed only the empty, sodium-lit parking lot below. My focus returned to the final print in the stack. My stomach constricted violently, captured within the reflection of a window. In the photograph's background was a face, gaunt, skull-like, with abyssal sockets where eyes should be, positioned directly behind where I must have stood. It made no sense. I took the picture. I pressed my fingers to my throbbing temples, my heart pounding a heavy rhythm against my ribs. The clock showed 10:15 p.m. Suddenly, the office felt suffocating. I locked up and fled. Sleep evaded me. The reflected visage replayed behind my closed eyelids. I reconstructed the moment of taking that shot. Standing on a deserted sidewalk outside a small office building, lens focused on my client entering. I was certain I had been alone. The city's low hum vibrated through the floor, mingling with the frantic pulse in my ears. Eventually, sheer exhaustion dragged me under. The next day, resolve formed. The camera had to go. Returned to its carton, I drove it across town to a cluttered pawn shop. The proprietor examined it, tested the shutter's click, and offered a negligible sum. I barely cared. Expulsion was the objective. But as he turned it over in his hands, I confronted the impossibility of explaining my fear. Weird prints were my only proof, hardly currency in his world. He named his price. I almost agreed, but a stubborn filament of the investigator in me resisted. Was there a rational thread I hadn't yet grasped? I mumbled something about needing to consider it and drove away. The camera, once more a heavy presence on the passenger seat. For several days, I adhered to a self-imposed ban. But fresh film canisters sat in my desk, silent temptations. And I am, if nothing else, persistent. On the next case, observing a suburban house, waiting for a late-night return, the camera came along. Just a few frames. I bargained with myself to see if the phenomenon persists. The street was hushed, bathed in the intermittent glow of streetlights. Cars passed infrequently. I documented the scene. Driveway, mailbox, curtained windows, standard procedure. I dropped the film at Silas Blackwood's, attempting normalcy, but his wary glance met mine. Later that night, my phone rang. Silas, his voice tight with an unprecedented urgency. "Elias, I've finished your photos. You need to come get them." My question about the problem was met with a flat, chilling response. "I don't want them here overnight." I drove to the lab immediately. He had my print spread across the counter like tarot cards predicting doom. He pointed to a sequence of 4. In each, the same hooded figure stood starkly before the subject's bedroom window. Its shrouded face was turned towards the camera's position, the cowl revealing only impenetrable darkness. In the final photo, the figure had moved, standing near a hedge in the yard, its posture suggesting it was looking directly towards the street, towards where I had been concealed. Silas confirmed the negatives showed no signs of tampering. He refused payment. "Take them," he insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And go." I drove straight back to the office. my hands gripping the steering wheel with painful intensity. Inside, I switched on every light, chasing back the shadows. I laid the new prints alongside the old, arranging them chronologically. The progression was undeniable, horrifyingly systematic. These shapes, these silhouettes, these hooded watchers, their positions were never random. They shifted, advanced, closed in over time. A knot formed in my throat. My eyes darted to my own reflection in the dark window pane. I strode over and decisively lowered the blinds, sealing the outside world away. I paced the length of the office, my head pounding. The camera's origin remained a blank. Who left it? Why? The thought of involving the police felt ludicrous. No tangible crime, no victim, no theft, just a collection of deeply unsettling photographs and a growing certainty I was either haunted or unraveling. I couldn't face my apartment that night. I remained in the office, the lights burning, eventually succumbing to a fitful doze in my chair around 3 a.m. A sudden noise startled me awake, a distinct scrape against the window glass. My heart leaped. Rising slowly, bracing myself, I crept towards the blinds. My mouth felt like sandpaper. With a trembling finger, I lifted one slat and peered into the pre-dawn gloom. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw a dark shape huddled on the fire escape. Something indistinct, like the heavy folds of a cloak momentarily stirred by a breeze. Then, it was gone. I stood frozen, breathing shallowly, telling myself it was fatigue, shadows, nerves. I listened intently for several minutes. Only the distant whisper of an early car disturbed the quiet. Checking the window latch was secure, I retreated to my chair. By morning, I knew I couldn't discard the camera, but I couldn't keep using it. I locked it away in the heavy steel safe nestled in my closet. A part of me felt that disposing of it would mean forever remaining ignorant. Was the camera the source, or merely a lens capturing something already there? Paranoia, perhaps. Or perhaps something truly malevolent had attached itself to the artifact, and now, to me. The silhouettes have taken up residence in my mind's eye. I scrutinize every photograph now, even innocuous snaps on my phone, instinctively searching the backgrounds for a lurking cowl, a distorted limb. The blinds in my office stay firmly shut. I conduct my business during daylight, making excuses to leave before dusk fully settles. I avoid looking out windows after dark. I oscillate between fearing for my sanity and fearing for my soul. Each time I force myself to look at those prints, the cold knot tightens in my gut. The camera sits in its metal tomb, yet I feel its presence, its dense, quiet weight behind the locked door. Sometimes, in the dead quiet of the office, I think I hear faint, internal clicks, the ghostly echo of a shutter firing on its own. I try to ignore it, but the sound resonates. And late at night, alone with the rustling files of other people's secrets, I remember the shapes in those photographs and wonder, with a dread that chills me to the bone, if they are still getting closer, step by inexorable step, each time I dared to look through that haunted lens. There exists a peculiar hush, native only to the deep woods, a stillness less like peace and more like a held breath, vast and hollow. It was this specific quiet, pregnant and unnerving, that saturated the air on the night everything unraveled. Elias had ventured solo into the wilderness countless times, but this excursion felt dissonant from the outset. He'd discovered a secluded haven miles from any marked trail, nestled deep within the forest's embrace. Just Elias, the stoic trees, and a canopy pricked by starlight. The precise solitude he craved. Late summer reigned. Days retained their warmth, yet evenings surrendered to a gathering chill. His tent rose in a small clearing bordered by a dense stand of pines, a pocket universe seemingly excised from the known world. No signal bars, no digital tethers. Perfection. The first day unfolded without incident. Gathering brittle firewood, securing his temporary home, tracing ephemeral paths through sun-dappled undergrowth. As dusk bled across the sky, a modest fire crackled, its smoke mingling with the sharp perfume of pine needles, painting the air with the scent of ephemeral domesticity. When the sun finally plunged beneath the serrated horizon, shadows elongated, transmuting the familiar woods into a realm of deeper mystery. But it wasn't until his fire dwindled to a pulse of embers that the silence truly registered. Initially, Elias dismissed it. Forests naturally subdue their chorus as night descends. Yet this was an absolute cessation, thick and oppressive, as if the world beyond his small circle of light had abruptly ceased to exist. No rustle of nocturnal foragers, no insectile thrum, no distant owl's lament. Nothing. A void had swallowed the ambient life. An unease, cold and serpentine, coiled in his gut. He chided himself, isolation playing tricks. He knew the woods, their moods, their solitary nature. Fear had never been his companion here, but this particular silence scraped against his nerves. He poked the embers, coaxing a brief, frantic flare before they settled back into their soft, watchful glow. The surrounding pines seemed to lean closer, their boughs casting skeletal shadows that writhed in the unsteady light. The sensation of being observed prickled the back of his neck. Ridiculous, he told himself, shaking his head. Just a forest, empty save for him and the indifferent wild. Still, the feeling clung, persistent, compelling furtive glances into the engulfing darkness, searching for an unseen presence he couldn't define. By the time he retreated into the nylon shell of his tent, the air had sharpened with cold, the silence deepening into something profound. He zipped the flap taut, a flimsy barrier against the disquietude pooling within him. Sleep remained elusive. With every closure of his eyes, the conviction grew. Something waited just beyond the fabric, patient and still. Hours must have passed in this liminal state before exhaustion claimed him, only for a sound from outside to rip him back to consciousness. He sat bolt upright, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Silence. Had he dreamt it? He strained his ears, listening past the frantic drumming in his chest. The profound stillness held. Then, again, a faint, dry rustling, the distinct sound of something shifting through the leaf litter just beyond his camp perimeter. His hand, trembling, fumbled for the flashlight. Its beam sliced the interior darkness, painting stark, dancing shapes on the tent walls. He held his breath, listening. There. A slow, almost methodical disturbance in the undergrowth, culminating in the unmistakable whisper of something brushing against the tent's taut fabric. Elias froze, breath lodged in his throat. This wasn't the clumsy passage of a deer or bear. The movement felt considered deliberate. as if the entity outside possessed awareness, intention. Drawing a ragged breath to steady his fraying nerves, he eased the zipper down a fraction, peering out. The fire was long dead, the campsite swallowed by moonless dark. His flashlight beam swept nervously across the tree line, illuminating only empty space, the impassive trunks of pines. Yet the feeling persisted, stronger now. Something lurked just beyond the light's reach, watching. He remained there, crouched in the tent's opening, for an immeasurable time, the flashlight a fragile ward against the shadows, his eyes scanning relentlessly. But the sound did not return. The woods resumed their profound, unnerving silence, and gradually the intense sensation of being watched began to recede, though it never fully vanished. Exhaustion warred with adrenaline. Finally, convincing himself it had been benign, a falling branch, a scurrying vole, he zipped the tent fully shut once more. He lay back, but sleep was a distant shore. Every faint nocturnal sigh of the forest, every rustle of wind through the canopy, sent fresh jolts along his nerves. He lay rigid in the blackness, listening to the immense quiet, waiting. He must have drifted off, for the next awareness was of morning light filtering weakly through the canvas. Birdsong, tentative at first, then bolder, stitched the air back together. The chill had lessened. Everything outside looked utterly normal, bathed in the gentle resurrection of dawn. A wave of foolishness washed over him. His imagination, fueled by solitude, had run wild. He emerged, stretching cramped muscles, surveying the campsite. Fire pit cold, cooking gear undisturbed, backpack leaning faithfully against its log. Then his gaze snagged on the ground. Footprints, faint yet starkly defined in the damp earth, leading directly from the tree line to the very side of his tent. Not animal spoor. These were too long, too narrow, disturbingly human-like. A chill, colder than the night air, traced its way down his spine. He crouched, his eyes following the trail. The prints described a single, deliberate circuit around the tent before retreating back towards the dense woods, vanishing as if the walker had dissolved into the shadows. His mind raced, grappling with the implications. No other camps existed for miles, no trails intersected this forgotten pocket, and the stealth. Why approach, circle, and leave unseen, unannounced? Why just watch? A creeping dread solidified within him. Packing became a frantic, clumsy affair, hands shaken as he crammed gear into his backpack. The thought of another night here, knowing someone or something had stood inches away while he slept, was intolerable. The return hike transformed the woods. Trees that yesterday seemed majestic now felt menacing, their shadows like grasping fingers. Every snapped twig, every susurrus of leaves became a potential threat, amplifying his sense of exposure, of being pursued. Relief flooded him as his car came into view, a metal shell of normalcy in the oppressive green. He tossed his pack onto the passenger seat, slammed the door, and twisted the key. The engine's roar a welcome intrusion. As he bumped down the rutted track, a final glance towards the trailhead froze him. There, half obscured by the lattice of branches at the forest's edge, stood a figure. Tall, unnaturally slender, its features lost in the deep shade. It remained utterly still, a silent sentinel watching his departure. Elias didn't hesitate. He stomped the accelerator, gravel spitting, eyes fixed on the road ahead, hands clenched wide on the wheel. He drove without stopping. pushing the miles between him and that place, until the familiar clutter of civilization rose around him like a shield. He never learned what waited in those woods, what presence had circled his tent in the dead of night. He hasn't returned. But sometimes, when the idea of solitude among the trees flickers in his mind, the memory surfaces. The suffocating silence, the inexplicable footprints, and the chilling certainty that somewhere, in the shadowed heart of the forest, an unknown watcher remains, waiting. Its genesis was innocuous, a phantom thread of sound woven into the drab tapestry of Ms. Albright's monologue on quarterly projections. A susurrus, barely there, beneath the drone of corporate speak. Had I not tilted my head just so, pressing the receiver closer, seeking some phantom clarity, perhaps it would have remained unborn to my ears. But I heard it fleetingly, before it dissolved back into the static ether. That whisper occurred 3 weeks ago. Now, engulfed by the pre-dawn gloom of my living room at 3 a.m., I regard my phone on the coffee table as if it were a venomous reptile coiled to strike. 2 minutes passed, it began its insistent summons. I recognized the caller, or rather the source, the same spectral sequence, 555-0194, that has stalked my waking hours and bled into my fractured sleep. A tremor begins in my fingertips as they stretch towards the device. Answering that first murmur was the genesis of this unraveling. Seeking its source, the fatal error. Ignorance, I now understand, was a fragile shield I should never have discarded. The descent began subtly. Following the incident during the Albright call, the auditory phantom resurfaced the next day while speaking with Mum. Mere fragments initially, incoherent sonic debris clinging to the edges of conversation, yet undeniably present. I meticulously cleaned the phone's speaker grill, scanned for ambient interference, even endured a tedious exchange with a bored technician named Kyle at the carrier's helpline. He performed remote diagnostics, found nothing anomalous. "Likely network flutter, sir," he offered with practiced indifference. "Or maybe just a poor signal patch. Give us a ring if it keeps up." It kept up. It amplified. Within days, the whispers shed their ambiguity, coalescing into clearer, more defined utterances, still hushed, yet now possessing discernible words. It was then that the first tendrils of genuine ice-cold fear wrapped around my heart, for the content wasn't random noise. It was commentary. Specific, unnervingly accurate commentary about me. "Cerulean weave," it breathed during a call confirming my appointment with Dr. Sharma's office. I froze mid-sentence, gaze dropping instinctively to the powder blue button-down I wore. "The caffeine stain blooms anew," it murmured later that afternoon, while I negotiated terms with Mr. Henderson. My eyes darted unwillingly to the dark archipelago spreading across my neglected desk blotter. "Vehicle unsecured again," it intoned during another mundane exchange. A jolt. I had retraced my steps to the car park less than an hour prior. Hadn't I, plagued by a sudden uncertainty? My palms grew slick whenever the phone demanded attention, whether incoming or outgoing. My pulse would quicken, a frantic drumbeat anticipating that silken, insidious voice slipping between the familiar cadences of human speech. I began compiling a meticulous log, charting each occurrence, desperately seeking a discernible pattern. The observations started trivially: attire, minor actions, forgotten chores, but soon deepened, probing more intimate territories. Clara's ghost lingers, doesn't it? It sighed while I spoke with Leo, my brother, mere heartbeats after I'd lingered too long over an old, faded photograph. Too few visits to Father's bedside before the end. That particular Barb arrived during a conference call, skewering a guilt I'd been wrestling with only that morning. The sterile scent of the hospice room suddenly vivid in my memory. I resorted to recording every call, replaying the audio through high-fidelity headphones, straining to isolate the parasitic whispers. They remained elusive, absent from every playback. The phenomenon was mine alone, a private haunting conducted through public airwaves. The true fracture occurred last week. I was catching up with my friend Finn when the voice, smoother than ever, sliced through our easy banter. The cold steel sleeps still, nightstand's embrace, 10 years undisturbed. The phone slipped from my suddenly nerveless grasp, clattering against the floorboards. That pistol, relic of a past I'd walled off after Clara left, a secret kept even from myself most days. How? A rustle followed, dry and brittle like autumn leaves skittering across asphalt. Was that laughter? Panic spurred action. The number, 555-194, became my obsession. Dialing it yielded only the sterile, automated pronouncement: "The number you have dialed is not in service." Telecom giants shrugged. Their digital ledgers held no trace of its existence. Even Mr. Davies, the private investigator I retained at ruinous expense for an expedited trace, returned baffled. "It's an anomaly," he confessed, rubbing his temples, his professional composure strained. "That prefix sequence, it's phantom data. Shouldn't route, shouldn't connect. It's like dialing a ghost." Silence became my attempted sanctuary. Phone powered down, battery removed. Yet it would reanimate, screen flaring to life unbidden, the phantom number burning against the glass. The calls persisted. The whispers shed their subtlety, becoming a running, real-time commentary on my decay. "Tremors return," it would observe coolly. "Pulse elevates, 110 BPM. 37 hours now without REM cycle." In a fit of desperate rage, I dismantled the device, pulverized its components, bought another, secured a fresh number under layers of obfuscation. The calls migrated, effortless as contagion, finding me within hours. My home became a fortress of surveillance, electronic eyes watching every angle. The recorded footage revealed only solitude. A man fraying at the edges, haunted by silence and unseen whispers. Last night marked the apotheosis. Sleep, a distant, receding shore. The phone's shrill summons pierced the quiet. No whisper now, but a voice, conversational, chillingly intimate. "Recall the 15th of July, 2013, it inquired gently. The humid night air, following Clara, watching her silhouette merge with his in the window. Remember the weight in your hand? Bile scalded my throat. That night, a poison secret I'd never exhaled, not even in the darkest solitude of my own thoughts. The pistol accompanied you. The voice reminisced almost fondly. 3 hours parked across the street. Loading, unloading, loading again. The engine turning over finally. The retreat, a commendable restraint. Wiser than your current trajectory, perhaps? I slammed the disconnect icon, but the phone immediately flared back to life. And again. And again. Which deposits me here, 3 a.m. The witching hour, cliche but devastatingly true. The living room swathed in gloom, the phone a malevolent idol on the coffee table, vibrating, ringing, demanding. 555-0194. My hand, an unsteady automaton, reaches. Surrender? Acceptance? No, just the raw, ragged need to know, to understand the shape of my tormentor. Hello? A fractured sound, barely mine. Swiftly, the whisper returns, intimate as a lover's breath. You truly wish to comprehend? Yes, the syllable scrapes my throat raw. Consult your inbox. My laptop awaits, lid open. Fingers fumbling, I navigate the familiar paths to my email. A new message resides there. Sender, null. Subject line, void. I click. A video file. The thumbnail freezes my blood. It depicts this room, now, my own slumped form on the sofa. Play. The perspective is impossible. High in the corner behind me, a vantage point where no lens exists. My own meticulous security setup confirms it. On screen, I see myself, phone clamped to ear. A live feed, timestamp ticking relentlessly in the corner. I whirl around, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The corner, empty, shadowed, inert. Continue observing. The voice purrs, not through the phone this time. It's here, in the room. On the glowing screen, my digital doppelganger turns, mirroring my own panicked scan of the room. And then, from the deepest umbra behind my on-screen self, something coalesces. Tall, indistinct, wrong. A sudden coolness prickles the nape of my neck, the ghost of expelled air. Remember the clandestine vigils? The whisper coils around me, a sibilant tide. Watching Clara through illuminated panes, the stolen intimacy, the surge of illicit power. Turnabout is fair play, wouldn't you agree? My limbs are leaden anchors, refusing command. On the laptop, the shadowed form extends a long-fingered hand, inches from my shoulder. Every secret moment, the whisper continues, weaving itself into the fabric of the air, every fleeting dark impulse, every shame you thought buried beneath layers of denial, catalogued, known. Fingers, impossibly cold, brush the fabric of my shirt, the contact burning like frostbite. We comprehend you utterly. Always have. And the collective is incomplete. Your talent for observation is noteworthy. You'll acclimate. The grip tightens on my shoulder, inescapable. On screen, the figure leans into the ambient light spilling from the laptop, its face resolving into focus. My face, a perfect replica, save for the eyes, twin voids, abyssal, swallowing the light, promising infinite emptiness. I try to scream, a strangled gasp caught in my throat, a pathetic mewling sound. The thing wearing my stolen features leans closer still, its breath glacial against my ear. A decision is required, it murmurs, its voice my own, yet utterly alien. Echoes of that night with Clara, yet this time the road doesn't offer escape. The room plunges into frigid blackness. The pressure on my shoulder becomes an inexorable pull, drawing me backward toward those vacant eyes that mock my own reflection. The phone, forgotten, slips from my lap to the floor. It immediately begins to ring again, its screen illuminating the familiar, dreaded sequence. 555-0194. But the call will go unanswered. Oblivion claims me. They discovered my shell 3 days hence, the phone still chiming its unanswered summons beside the cooling body. Official documentation cited cardiac arrest, a neat conclusion unable to reconcile the rictus of pure, unadulterated terror etched onto my features. The phantom number, the thousands of logged calls originating from nowhere, the peculiar video file found open on my laptop, displaying only an empty living room time-stamped to my final moments. These form the frustrating, insoluble core of the case. Unsolved. Closed. But the whispers didn't cease with my pulse. Sometimes phones ignite in the dead of night across this sprawling city. Listen closely enough to the static on the line, tune your ear past the mundane drone of the world, and you might discern a familiar cadence. Perhaps mine. Heed this. Should such whispers find your ear, resist the urge to trace their origin. Do not seek understanding where none is offered. And when 555-194 illuminates your screen in the lonely hours, let it ring. We observe. We listen. The solitude here is profound, you see, and we are always seeking new eyes, new ears, new voices for the chorus. Ring, ring. Is that your phone now?